He's a national disaster insurance expert. He's also with stormhelpteam.org. And Scott Major, we're so glad to have you here on the show.
A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is amazing, this story about, we're hearing that, the Governor Andrew Cuomo said that his administration is working. It sounds like he's trying to do, the best he can. He's trying to work with banks to release millions upon millions of dollars. Why haven't they gone out yet? I'm confused.
I've handled storms around the country, and I see this a lot, and it is nothing short of despicable. There is no reason in the world why banks could not make the system easy through online forms, submissions, and verification processes that would allow these people to get their money immediately. They could have coordinated with preferred vendors, where if a vendor submits an invoice saying that they've done the repairs, they would get paid immediately. The banks are being rewarded because they're collecting the interest while this money waits, and there's no penalties to them, and the interest isn't benefiting the owners. So it's a very, very difficult situation which should never happen, and we need to do something about this so that in the future this doesn't happen again.
So how do you break it? How do you break this cycle? I mean, this sounds like a bit of a bureaucratic mess, and in the meantime, people are in our community have no insurance, no help. I mean, it's a mess.
It is a mess, and it's frightening and very frustrating, and the only way this is going to be changed is if the legislator steps in and makes statutes that will actually punish the banks from not responding, just like they do with insurance companies if they don't respond timely. And, short of that, the people need to rise together, like they're doing through these articles and other things, and make a lot of noise. It may turn out, as a lawyer, that they're going to need to sue these banks for fraud or improper delay of the monies and in a class action format, because there is a lot of problems and unnecessary delays in this process.
Yeah, and how long could it be, for our listeners out here, especially in the tri-state area, where it has been a long, cold winter? I mean, when I think about it, it's been more than 100 days. And I was out in many of the communities doing a lot of coverage. I do a lot of stuff with CNN and Headline News, and I was out there every day covering the storm and talking to people in all parts of the tri-state area. And at that point, I thought, oh my gosh, these poor people have to go through another week or 2 or 3. And now it's been over 100 days. It's mind-blowing, Scott. What can people do who are listening?
Well, I've been doing town meetings across the state, so I share your empathy and the frustration that you have with these people who are struggling. I can tell you that do not expect the money to be freed up instantaneously. It's going to take 30, 60, 90 days more for a lot of people, because there just is no incentive, no motivation other than just goodwill for the banks to respond in any more expedited fashion. Their system is not set up in a way that's ever going to be easier unless they change it to an online basis or a different type of format and processing. People are going to have these delays, and I can only say that people ought to make a lot of noise. They ought to hire lawyers. I'll be happy to help them and sue these banks and other people for their wrongdoing. The problem is, though, and once you get into all that, understandably, I think you got to take some action. Maybe sometimes even the threat of a lawsuit to some of these banks make them open up, because the thought of going through meanwhile, they don't have a roof over their head. So many of our listeners in some of the tough areas that were hard hit, they're still staying with relatives or friends or whatever. The thought of a lawsuit, sometimes you make it go, oh God, it's a long-winded process. What can they do? And sometimes just even in the threat of it from a bank, maybe a call from someone like you is enough to kind of go, oh gosh, we better hurry up. You're absolutely right. And yes, the threat of a lawsuit will work, or at least motivate people to understand. One of the great things that's happening is people like you have the courage to put this on the radio and on television so that people can see and get exposed to these types of bank activities and other government delays, so that we sort of embarrass them into doing their job. There just is no reason for this, and the only way is either through litigation or through public opinion and public exposure.
Absolutely. Well, you keep up the great work. Everybody, Scott Major, he's a national disaster insurance expert with stormhelpteam.org. And thank you for giving everybody some great advice in our area, Scott. Thanks so much.
Best of luck. Hang in there, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. And gosh, everybody, you heard sometimes even just hiring somebody and getting, riding these banks. I mean, it's outrageous. I mean, how crazy is this? Finally, some money kind of comes. And, Governor Cuomo, to his credit, and also Peter King, and a lot of these folks really pushing hard to get the money. And now there's a holdup on sending out, it's over 6,600 checks that were approved, but they're being held up through the bank and all. I mean, how nutty is this whole bureaucratic mess? What a disaster. So anyway, make sure you put some pressure on the bank. Make sure that you, put pressure on politicians, whoever can do. I mean, you need the help. This is crazy. hopefully us here, shouting about it and talking about it will also help as well.